now that we know about the first effective gubernatorial recall, let's talk about the more well-known recall election. First, again, let's give some context. The year is 2002, and the incumbent Democratic governor of California, Gray Davis, was just elected for a second term, but he was obviously declining in popularity. You see, his first term began with the dot-com bubble, which made his poll numbers go up, but ended with the California electricity crisis. For those who don't know what that is, it was when electric companies manipulated the market to cause an artificial shortage of electricity in California, causing many statewide blackouts. Pretty much everybody blamed Davis, as they felt that he didn't do jack to help Californians during the crisis, pointing out many of Davis's recent re-election contributions from these same energy companies left him with his hands tied. Speaking of campaign contributions, people also called on the fact that Davis received donations from the California Correctional Peace Officers Association and later helped pass a bill that would give this group a $5 billion raise, so he, of course, faced some bribery accusations. The recall began when activist Ted Costa, GOP consultant Mark Abernathy, and State Representative Howard Kalugian started to gathering signatures, though nobody really cared about these efforts until Representative at the time, Darrell Issa, donated $2 million to the campaign, as well as announcing that should a recall happen, he will run himself as a candidate to replace Davis. The petition ended up getting 1.6 million signatures. This recall effort was to be organized by Lieutenant Governor Cruz Bustamante. It's usually the governor's job to handle recalls, but since he was the one being recalled, they couldn't really ask him to be in charge of it because that'd be a huge conflict of interest. The recall ballot was structured like this. There were two sections of the ballot that you had to button in. One, should Governor Davis be recalled? And two, which of the candidates listed below do you want to replace him? If a majority of people voted no on question 1, question 2 would be made irrelevant and Davis would remain in power. But if a majority voted no, well, then one of these candidates would replace him. As such, this was different than most other gubernatorial recalls, and Davis would not actually be a candidate in the election, and he would purely be advocating for people to vote for the no option. He cited the recall was an insult to people who participated in the 2002 election, and was a waste of taxpayer money, and he pointed out a potential scenario where yes wins by a majority of votes in question 1, but the votes for the no option would be larger than the votes for the highest polling candidate of the recall, which would mean a smaller amount of the population actually gets to choose who the governor is. And due to the fact that this was so close to the last election, they decided they were going to skip the primary process and instead have every candidate filing actually make it onto the general election ballot, which made Davis decry the fact that someone who could be elected the next governor would be from the far right or the far left. And since this was a Republican-led effort, he focused on the right-wing power grab aspect of all this. And due to the fact that they had to organize this whole election process very fast, they significantly lowered the candidate requirements to ensure that somebody could be chosen on the ballot come election day. A California Democrat or Republican just needed 65 signatures from their respective parties and pay $35,000, or get 10,000 signatures with no payment required. Minor parties were given a break and only had to get 150 signatures from their respective party, no money required. Now, I know what you're all sitting there thinking about. Yeah, we've heard enough about the process. What about the candidates that actually ran in this election? Well, here we go. Now, before we continue, we're going to have to establish big ground rules for who I talk about, because 135 candidates managed to get on the recall ballot, and due to the lower requirements to get on the ballot, many of them were just average Joes or celebrities building up their profiles, like Hustler magazine publisher Larry Flint, adult film actress Mary Carey, and Gary Coleman running as candidates. And as much as the remaining 128 candidates tried to make themselves a factor in this race, it really only ended up being a race between 5 candidates. First, what the heck were the Democrats going to do? Were they going to campaign purely against the recall? Would they campaign for someone in the recall, and if so, who? The California Democratic Party, at the behest of Davis, urged prominent Democrats to mostly sit out of the recall in order to delegitimize its efforts. But of course, it was best for them to have at least one candidate on the ballot, just in case it actually works. The most prominent candidate that the Democrats actually tried to run was Senator Dianne Feinstein, as she was the most popular statewide Democrat, but she declined to do so. Insurance Commissioner John Garamendi briefly entered the race, but dropped out 2 days later. The candidate who eventually became the Democrats' torchbearer was Lieutenant Governor Cruz Bustamante, who had an icy relationship with Davis throughout the tenure. His decision to run was very controversial, as it kind of made people question Davis and his administration. In fact, considering the fact that Cruz was running against Davis, many people assumed that he was a Republican. That's how strange many people saw this decision. However, he did run on a slogan called "No to Recall, Yes on Bustamante," which showed he did ultimately oppose the recall election and was running pretty much just to be the safeguard in case it actually works. Now, Cruz and Davis were more moderate Democrats, so the left wasn't really too keen on them. Let's see who these guys have to offer. There were two major left-wing candidates that they were trying to rally behind. First was independent candidate and author Arianna Huffington, whose biggest policy position was public financing of elections. The other being the 2002 Green Party gubernatorial candidate and 1976 Socialist Workers' Party presidential candidate, Peter Camejo, who was running as the officially endorsed Green Party candidate, although there were a couple tiny Greens that entered. These two had actually made joint campaign appearances together to push for left-wing issues in the race. Now on to the GOP, the organizers of this whole thing. First was State Representative Tom McClintock announcing he would run, but his campaign was completely overshadowed by the fact that Issa already stated he wanted to run. However, both of them took a back seat when film actor Arnold Schwarzenegger announced his candidacy on the Jay Leno show. After that, Issa immediately dropped out of the race and endorsed him, but McClintock stayed in the race. The reason being, I assume because McClintock thought, like many of the other celebrities who were entering in this race, Schwarzenegger was doing this purely for publicity or something. But the notion of his campaign not being serious led to a huge problem because Arnold Schwarzenegger quickly became the frontrunner for the race. The only one who was able to bring a sufficient challenge was Bustamante, who would sometimes tie with Schwarzenegger in polls. As such, the candidates started attacking Schwarzenegger hard, most prominently Arianna Huffington describing her and Schwarzenegger's candidacies as the hybrid versus the Hummer. On September 3rd, the first debate of the cycle happened, with one interesting thing. Schwarzenegger was not in the debate, and instead there was a minor candidate named Peter Urboth, who was considered the sixth highest polling in the race. The reason being, Schwarzenegger stated that he would not participate in debates early in the cycle and would only participate in the last debate in the cycle. The other candidates simply said it was because Arnold was ill-prepared for the campaign and was hiding from his opponents, and kind of was like, maybe this is just a big publicity stunt. The month had shown the race was pretty much these five, so smaller candidates started dropping out of the race, including Urboth. Though it wasn't until September 24th where things shifted again, as the five frontrunners held a debate at California State University, the most notable exchanges of the debate being the ones between Arnold and Arianna. Though the debate had actually led to the field narrowing even more so, as Arianna Huffington had decided to drop out of the race and endorsed Davis's call to stop the recall, though she would still end up being on the ballot due to the fact that it was a late exit. Immediately after she dropped out, Bustamante endorsed her plan for public financing of elections as a way to siphon off her support. Eventually, Election Day approached, and the results ended up showing Davis was recalled with 54.4% of voters saying get rid of him, and 44.6% saying keep him around. Now, who would end up replacing him? This is a big shock that I'm pretty sure nobody has ever heard of before. Though if you actually don't know this, Arnold Schwarzenegger won with 48.6% of the vote, Bustamante getting a close second with 31.5% of the vote, McClintock getting 13.4% of the vote, and Camejo getting 2.8% of the votes. And Schwarzenegger would end up winning a second term as governor of California. So yes, Schwarzenegger actually shares the same honor as Earl Warren, Supreme Court Justice, and Hiram Johnson. It's a very interesting world we live in. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified when the official video mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, join my Discord, or check out my articles on the Independent Political Report.